Hey, what's up? And welcome back to Mental Edge Training Coach here with Chad Hermanson. I've been away for a few weeks. We took my family on a vacation out to Hawaii during spring break. It was absolutely fantastic. Went out to Oahu, just enjoyed the beach, man. What a beautiful place. It was so awesome to just sit there on the beach, not think about anything, and just relax and soak up the sun and just be with my family. So if you ever get out to Oahu, obviously, I'd spent some time out there before, playing the Hawaiian Winter League, and I was 18 years old, I think, when I went out there and did that. So it was so fun to just go with my family, hang out. The water was amazing. So grateful I was able to do that. So getting back into the podcast mode here. And I wanted to bring on a guest today to discuss a little bit about recruiting. But as always, I want to remind you of mental edge coaching that I'm doing with high school, collegiate athletes, and also a lot more recently parents. Parents obviously have a lot of questions about how to manage things, not only like we have recruiting, right? We have different types of things that they're trying to go through and work through. And as parents, right, we still ourselves have to manage our mind. We have to manage our emotions through all of this because our baby, right, is going through these situations. And so we tend to let our thoughts and feelings get in the way of some things. So one place you can go to is I have a new website to check out for you to set up a really a 20 to 30-minute consultation call with me at chadhermansoncoaching.com. So there I have some testimonials you can go through. I have a video explaining a little bit about what I do, not only with athletes, but with parents. So if you're interested in that, again, go check out chadhermansoncoaching.com. So today I wanted to bring on a guest, great friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. His name is Derek Amicone. I actually interviewed his brother, Trevor, who is a hitting coach in the Yankees farm system, really when I started the podcast about 2 years ago now. So Trevor, I think, is up in AAA with the, I believe he's in AAA with the hitting coaches in the Yankees organization. So he's getting closer to the big leagues. His brother Derek spent a lot of time in college baseball. I first met him at Utah Valley University, D1 school out in Orem, Utah. It's right next to BYU. Derek was a recruiting coordinator at the time and infield coach. And so that's when we first met. That's when I was scouting. He later went on to Grand Canyon for a little while, spent time there as an assistant. And now he's back in Utah. He is working in the recruiting side of things for baseball. He is working with an organization called College Athlete Advantage. I don't know if they go by CAA, but we're going to learn about the recruiting process, how it's changed over the years in regards to social media. There's a lot of different things now that kids have to go through. And so we're going to get almost like a complete webinar presentation here. It's going to be pretty cool. This is what I'm expecting from you, Derek. So enjoy this conversation with Derek, and hopefully you learn something about the recruiting process. All right, Derek, what's up, man? How we doing?
Good. How are you, Chad?
I'm doing awesome. You got your bees background there. You're out in Salt
Yeah.
Lake. Tell us where you are.
Yeah. So I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. Yeah, I got my Smith's ballpark background. So everybody's always talking about the best view in baseball with the mountains. So I like having that as my background. So yeah, I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Love it. Yeah, when I was in AAA in Nashville playing in the PCL, I remember going there and I saw a lot of family out there, so they would come out to the games and all the my teammates and the players that were playing, they're like, man, this view is incredible. It was still, if you were like out there in April or May, sometimes you got snow on the mountains still, right? I'm sure there's a lot of snow out there right now with you guys,
Yeah.
right?
We got crushed, so it's still it's still way up there. So we still have like whether it's Utah playing in our field or the bees guys, because a lot of them obviously are from all over the country, are coming out of the dugout and taking pictures and are like, holy cow, like, I didn't realize there'd still be this much snow. So yeah, we've had a
Yeah.
crazy spring snow wise.
Yeah, you guys are coming off of what, like the kind of a record-breaking year of snow. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's I've heard like the worst ever or like the worst in 50 years. I can't tell you which,
Yeah.
but it's
I
not
guess
good. for
What do they
baseball.
what do they call it? Is it what's the term? The runoff of the
Yeah,
snow, like that's gonna melt. Like people are
yeah.
really worried about it out there.
Yeah, so
Right.
we actually at Smith's Ballpark, we have some sandbags kinda ready just because, yeah, I guess in, like, 1983, I wanna say, 81, 83, there was a bad flooding, that went right down, like, 13th South where the ballpark is,
Hmm.
and, I wasn't alive then, but I heard it was really bad, so if we have that kinda dynamic, but I don't think we will, we kinda have some sandbags lining the office area, so I
There you
think we'll
go.
be okay flood-wise, so,
Nice. All right.
yeah.
Well, good. Well, I wanted to bring you on today, and I've never really have had a lot of discussion on the recruiting part of the game. So I know it's changed quite a bit for baseball in general, and I think just with college in general, it's way different now compared to when I guess you and I both went through it. Um, you're now working with College Athlete Advantage, is that correct?
Yep, that's
Do you
correct.
is it CAA? You guys
Yeah.
pronounce
Yep,
like the abbreviations for that?
yep.
So you gave me some ideas too of what we can cover in regards to what are we looking at with recruiting. So tell us what has changed the most, say, over the last 5 to 10 years with recruiting.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, a lot's changed just in the dynamics of like, could be anything from social media. Like, there's more kids feel the need to have a presence on social media, whether that's tweeting out videos, tagging coaches, those kind of things. To um, the event structure, meaning there's a lot more events than there ever used to be. I mean, when I played in high school, there were a few select events that you would go to, but not nearly the amount that it has turned into. And so there's a lot of like picking and choosing, like, hey, should we go to this event, go to that event? There's a lot more access to showcases with any given organization, and then obviously you have the college camp dynamic, and then you also have the recruiting earlier and earlier. And I think there's going to be some legislation, from what I understand, with the NCAA that's going to tweak that a little bit. And then obviously the biggest one that has changed a lot for kids is the transfer portal. So the
Mm,
transfer portal has affected obviously kids on campus as well as those that are in high school, because a college coach may say, "Hey, you know what? Like, we're going to take a proven guy that's transferring from such and such school instead of a high school senior, if you will." And so
mhm.
that's kind of caused like you know a lot of strain for high school age players, and I think COVID and how the rosters expanded as well. Um, Coaches have been more likely to go, we're just going to take a transfer, or look, at a junior college transfer or a 4-year transfer, and maybe not take the chance on a high school senior unless they're really polished and ready to go for our level. So those are probably the 4 or 5 that I would say that are vastly different than it used to be.
Yeah. So rosters have changed. What's the number up to now?
The last time I checked, it's still at 40, but it's going to be going back down to 35 at some point,
Okay.
for Division One, and I believe Division Two is the same. And then I'll probably state this wrong, but I believe the NCAA legislation is going to have, right now you can have 27 players on scholarship at the Division One level. And I think a year or two, they're going to change that to 32, which
Gotcha.
is, to me, it's difficult because you're going to be spreading that limited scholarship money, 11.7 for 32 guys rather than 27. So some of those scholarship numbers could go down for some kids, where it's going down to, instead of 25%, it could be going down even lower, if I'm understanding that right. Um, but the roster, if you have 40 guys on a roster, 35 and 27 are on scholarship, what they currently are, is you're going to have a handful of those guys that are on, not on athletic aid. So it could be
Mhm.
academic or just purely a walk on. So I don't think people fully uh, understand that. Like, I talk to families all the time that, it's not necessarily a fault of their own where they just don't know. Like, hey, do you know how many scholarships there are at the Division 1, the Division 2, Division 3, junior college? And they're way, they're way off. And
Mhm.
so when they hear that, it's like, okay, we didn't realize that it was that limited, and we thought maybe we would be in a sport that would have more scholarship money. And in reality, it's not really that much of a scholarship, allocated sport. And so um that causes challenges, but I mean, we advise, and even when I was coaching, I mean, you want kids that are doing well in the classroom because
Mhm.
it's to give them a chance to it's going to give them a chance to get more scholarship money. So, like, Paxton Schultz, who's in Double A with the Blue Jays now, who Jeff drafted, Jeff Schultz, and
Mhm.
he was on basically 45% of academic aid and then 40% of baseball aid. And so people don't realize that it's like, hey, if you want to get more money, you're going to have to do well in the classroom, and that's not always the most appealing to people, if you will.
So when the high school coaches have been harping on those kids, "Hey, man, you gotta do well in the classroom," right? It's instead of, "I'm just gonna get this full ride scholarship that's all based off of my more or less physical ability, right, on the baseball field," right? And
Yeah.
that's the old adage, right? We've been telling kids that forever, like, you gotta do it in the classroom as well. Obviously, it's gonna open up more doors for you, right, in regards to all the divisions. So, I think that kinda leads us to we had a little bit of a D1 or bust,
Yeah.
type mentality. Tell us about that and what you're seeing with kids and families you talk with.
Yeah, so I think, like, it's hard because I mean, it's the most appealing for kids, right? Hey, they see it, whether it's, ESPN Plus, the World Series, their local university. It's, hey, they get the sweet gear, all that kind of stuff. But in reality, like, not as many kids get that opportunity right out of high school. And so I think a lot of kids set themselves up for that and then are really disappointed when it doesn't happen, and can either say, "Hey, I don't want to play at all," or pass on some opportunities that can be really good for them. Meaning, like, it could be a junior college, it could be a Division 2. The junior college level, it's like, hey, you might end up surpassing some of these kids right now that are committed to a school, but you're just not willing to be patient enough to say, you know what, like, I'm not developed enough yet. Okay, there's not a school that fits me, but in 2 years down the road, I can have my pick of Division 1 school
Mhm.
in anywhere in the country. And I think what, and this is more anecdotal and kind of like me talking to families and noticing it with my own eyes, is like the the social media pressures and dynamics of seeing, like, okay, my friend committed here, you know, I have to feel like I'm gonna go somewhere as well. Like, I want to be committed. I want to show, other people I'm committed to this school. We want to be walking at the mall with our school, sweatshirt on, wherever
Mhm.
that is, and show
Mhm.
that, like, hey, we're also part of this group. And I think, like, people really shut themselves off to a lot of good opportunities that, I mean, again, like, the long game to me and the D1 or bust is really like, it's it's I tell families all the time, would you rather be the kid that goes to a Division 1 right out of high school and you don't fit, you get 30 at bats or you pitch 8 innings, and then you're going to a junior college because you're not ready, or you say, hey, I'm out of here. And then at that junior college, you're scrambling to get back to another Division 1, and you've got to have a
Mhm.
good year, you've got to play well, or you're that kid that, okay, you know what, you're not ready for a Division 1 out of high school. Go to a junior college, you get 500 at bats in 2 years, you perform really well, and then you can go to pretty much anywhere you want to go. And
Yep.
so I think there's this really big, like, everybody, I think, will agree with that, it's second equation, but, like, in the moment, everybody's like, I'm not going to be that kid that pitches 8 innings and, you know, ends up going to a junior college. I'm going to be the one that comes in and plays as a freshman. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
you know, that works great, but just doing numbers, like, it just doesn't always work that way. And so, um, I think kids, you know, kids and parents just really do the comparison game a lot, and I think that's what contributes to D1 or bust. And, I mean, they just don't realize, like where you and I are at, Chad, like Utah has 4 Division I schools,
Mhm,
Nevada has 2, Arizona has 3, and then some of those programs are really, really high levels from a conference standpoint, and they
mhm,
just may not fit there.
right,
And and then there's opportunities all across the country that they may fit at a Division I, that have places for them, and they just go, hey, if I can't go to this school, then you know what, it's not worth it to me, or I would rather walk on and then not be there in a year, which just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
right. Yeah, no, I we see it all the time, right? In my little community out here in Vegas, a great example, there's a player that went to UNLV last year. I don't believe got many at bats, let's say less, probably less than 50. I don't know the exact number. Decided to transfer, as a sophomore, is now, and I don't know if that ended up being a red shirt. I don't know what the numbers are for the red shirt at bats, right, and all that stuff, what that consists of, but is now at CSN and killing it, right? Is doing really well. Has been player of the week numerous times, um, and I'd be curious to, like, well, what were their thoughts? Were there, what were the reasons why they left? Did the kid not think he was going to play as a sophomore, right? Was there like, oh, they're bringing in all these other guys. They want me to be, let's say he's a two-way guy, he could pitch as well. They want me to be more of a pitcher, but I want to hit,
Yeah.
right? So now I'm going to go hit here and show the improve it. So kind of gambling on yourself a little bit, but also now killing it, right?
Yep.
So yeah, no, it's interesting, and it's kind of funny in regards to the comparison, right? In our egos as parents, we want our kid to go to the best possible school because it makes the kid feel good, it makes us feel good, but is that the best place for your kid to go?
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is too, and to just to like harp on that a little bit longer too, is like I mean, the transfer portal aspect too is like, hey, some kids go, well, I'm just going to go in the transfer portal then, right? And it's like,
Mhm,
well, if you got 10 at bats or 15 at bats in the transfer portal, I'm like, you're not going to be as appealing as you might think. Like, you might have to have a pre-existing relationship with
mhm,
some other coach at some other school where it's like, it's not going to just be foolproof and be like, well, then I'll just go in the portal and I'm going to be a star at this school. And it's like, you still have to go in there and perform. You're going against their recruiting class, that kind of stuff. And people just don't want to take that kind of, you know, those kind of dynamics into account. And I think,
mhm,
I heard this line a little bit ago that I really liked. And I think it correlates really well into recruiting and just the long game, if you will, is he who brags best brags last. And that to me is like, hey, we can have like the really, really good moment of like, hey, I'm announcing on Twitter that I'm committed to such and such school. Well, what's going to happen in 4 years down the road? You know what I mean? And are you going to be leaving that school with a lot of debt? Are you going to have gone to
mhm,
3 different schools by the time that 4 or 5 years are up? Or the kid that goes to such and such, it could be Southern Nevada, ends up going to Oklahoma State on a big scholarship, not in debt, gets drafted, and nobody really like factors that in where it's like we really just have to have that instant gratification of being like, hey, I showed that I'm committed, like look at me, this is great.
yeah,
We have
right,
those dynamics. Instead it's like, okay, what's going to happen in the 4 to 5 years from now, you know? And so I think we try to harp on that with families as much as we can, to look at the bigger picture and look forward to, you name the time frame. It could be longer if you're at a academic school. It could be a 40-year decision, right? Getting a
sure,
degree at a
yeah.
great university, it could be a life-changing decision. So
When you're talking with families that they're wanting to hire you to work with them through the recruiting process, Right. What are some of, I guess, the main questions that tend to come up almost with every single family?
I think the some of the biggest are gonna be like, is this event worth going to? Like we've been told this is a good thing to go to. Um, and it could be anything from a camp, like, hey, it's gonna be a showcase camp, it's gonna be a showcase with a particular organization. They say there's gonna be coaches there. Should we do this? Should we spend our money? And so a lot of that can be the fact that families don't know, like the volunteer assistant, and it's no disrespect to the volunteer, but just the way that works right now with NCAA baseball is they don't recruit. And so, they're going to go to a camp that they're going to be in front of coaches that don't recruit, which
Mhm.
basically means that, you know, they're paying those coaches, right? So I'm paying to attend that camp, and that those coaches are basically making their living because they're the volunteer assistant.
Now,
And
when you
then
say they don't recruit, does that mean they can't recruit? Like they can't talk to the player about coming to that
Mhm.
school?
Yep,
Okay.
correct. So, and usually what will happen is like if a volunteer assistant likes a player, I mean, they're going to tell their staff, but at that point, like the recruiting guy or one of their accountable recruiting coaches is going to have to go see him, right? And so it's like it just doesn't hold kind of as much weight as
Mhm.
going it could be a college camp where you're exposed to the whole coaching staff. And so we get asked about events a lot. And then I think, um, you know, one that happens quite a bit, and it kind of goes back to comparison, is like, I don't understand like why we're not getting more attention. Meaning like we had a teammate that's committed and we feel like we're better than that teammate, or why is this kid committed to this school and we're not talking to anybody? And so that part of it is like, hey, look, well, we have to get you in front of the right people, get you the feedback that you need. Meaning, like, it's really easy for me to call a coach at X university and say, hey, what do you think of Johnny? Do you think he's far away from what your need is? Where do you see his playing ability? And so trying to get feedback for families is very, very important because a lot of kids um, and families go to a tournament or an event and just hope, right? Like hope that somebody likes them or hope that somebody sees them and that something's going to happen that way. And it just, in reality, it just doesn't. So,
Mhm.
I think the advisement piece is really, really important because we can provide those kind of feedback and information to people where it's like, hey, this is going to be a waste of your time and money because they don't have any interest in you. Or it's not just as simple as interest, and I think people lose this a lot, is like they don't have a need at your position. You might be a really
Uh,
good player, but this university just they don't need that position. And so, just because you're not talking to so and so and this kid's committed to uh this program, maybe they had the need at that position and they don't have the need at your position. It's
right.
not just as simple as that. And so those are
Mhm.
probably, from my experience, probably the two biggest topics of our conversation is this an event that's worth going to? And like, why aren't we getting talked to more? Okay. Or
Mhm.
why is this kid committed and we're just as good as this player, or we feel like we are? So those are
Right.
probably the two biggest topics.
Okay. So, and when a family comes to you, there are probably a couple things are happening, right? They need some help, whether it's just advice in the recruiting process, or they need help in getting. I need you to get my son out to some schools. And so,
Uh-huh.
how does that work with your organization? Do you specifically have relationships with these coaches? Through your coaching experience, and you built that network. How does that process all work?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So like, the first thing we'll do is like, we'll do some of the online, like they create a profile and get that kind of stuff dolled up. And then what makes us in particular unique is that um, we evaluate all of our players. And so what that means is um, everyone that works in our organization has a similar background to me, whether you're either a college coach, former college player, former pro player. Like we just added a young man that used to play at Kentucky and in the big leagues. And so it's all reputable baseball guys. And so what we do is basically we evaluate them on film and in person. And then from that point, we basically say, okay, we think you fit at this level. We think you're a Division 1 player. We think you're a Division 2 or a junior college player. You name the level. And then we start to contact those schools, meaning could be from me calling, a coach at this university, from me texting them, or doing more of the bigger kind of communication through email or social media, to get their name out to people that are at that level, if you will. And so I think that's uh, a big thing that we do that, you know, families appreciate it, but I think like families that don't work with us don't fully appreciate that, because it's like, hey, I think I'm a Division 1 player, but I'm biased, right? So
Right.
like, I have that opinion of myself, but I've got about 10 to 12 people that are saying, you know what, you're going to fit better at a junior college. And from that point, it goes relatively smooth in going, okay, like such and such junior college has interest in you. Would you be willing to come out and work out with them? Okay. Would you be
Mhm.
willing to take a visit? And so that's the simple way of how our process works. And then, we everybody in our organization has a set of contacts, whether it's some guys may know a coach at a school that I don't, and vice versa. And we kind of communicate back and forth of going, we always get incoming texts or phone calls that say, hey, um, such and such university needs a 2024 right-handed pitcher, catcher, you know, corner outfielder that can hit. And so we go across our network and say, okay, these are the guys that I've got, and we've all evaluated them and see them fitting at that level, and then we
Mhm.
pass that information on. So it's a pretty good, and a pretty efficient process of how we communicate that information to parents and to coaches, that like, hey, we've got a good network of players, and these are the guys that are going to fit. And like we make the promise that we're not going to call, if we evaluate you as a Division 3 player, we're like, we're not calling TCU, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
that's one of the ways that we lose credibility, and TCU is not going to take our phone calls, is like, you sent us a kid that can't play there. So we don't do that. We avoid that at all costs. And we'll get those questions every once in a while, but you have to. And I think that's a great thing for us, is kids are not getting the information of like, you know what, bud, like, you just may not fit at that level. Okay.
Right.
Like, they keep going and going, well, I went to this camp and, they should have said I should come to another one. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, you're paying money to them, right? And so it's like, you really have to sort through. Again, parents are going to go, well, he should be a Division 1 player. He hit 440, and this other kid hit 430, and he's going to Division 1. And it's like, it's not really how it works. So
Right. Yeah. No, it's fascinating on how your mind can go in all different directions in that comparison game, because I played shortstop, my second baseman played here. We have very similar numbers, and yet the skills could be way different, right?
big
And
time.
line up that way. So
And I
one thing that stood out to me what you said is you actually you do a physical evaluation with every player.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so with you being in Salt Lake, are you working mainly with folks from Utah, or do they fly in to see you if they're, say, out of state? How does that process work?
So I mainly work with like Salt Lake, Davis, Utah County, and I have a few St. George, and then I've got a couple that are in Idaho and one in Wyoming at the moment. And so the ones that are really local, like I drive to them, we meet up somewhere. I don't want anybody flying
Mhm,
to me and costing them more money to come down here. And so we meet up, we go through a full workout, and then basically like we give all that information to our advisors. It could be anything from the video that I've shot to a cumulative, like, uh, these are what his metrics are like, and kind of go from there. And then I get the chance to see a lot of my players play in the spring or summer and fall as well. And then
mhm,
I think what helps our evaluation process too is it's really easy for me to text the coach at Division 1 or junior college and be like, hey, what do you think on this kid? And there's a lot of coaches that are really good about going, you know, I like that kid. I've seen him like 6 times, but he's gotta put on weight, okay?
Yeah.
And
There's
it's like
something missing, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and so it kinda gives us a lot of validation of like, you know, okay, then we're pretty spot on and like, everybody's gonna miss, right? But, the guys that I've had commit in this process, which is a fair amount, they've all lined up with our evaluation system spot on. Like we haven't had anybody, at least with me, that has okay, committed higher or lower than what we evaluated. And so it's a good working system.
Yeah. No, that's great. I if I was a parent, that's what I would be looking at in regards to is there an actual evaluation?
Yeah.
Because I know like I worked with NCSA for about a year, year and a half. It was more on the sales part of the job where I would do calls with families and basically take them through the recruiting process,
Yep.
right? And basically what we call it qualify them. Can this kid actually go play college baseball? And it always felt a little bit weird, if I'm being frank, because I didn't know that, right? They might send in some info. I didn't see any video. I don't know what this kid can really do,
Yep.
right? So it's kind of almost like let's get them in the door, and then a video would be shot, and then there would be another group of people that would evaluate the video and then disperse that and match them up with colleges, right?
Yep.
Which to me, just evaluating over video without seeing a person in person, right? And seeing because you can get fooled by video
Easily. Yeah, you can.
easily. Just from the scouting world, I'm like, man, this guy is way different on video than in person or vice versa, right? And so that's fantastic that you guys do that, right? That you go evaluate that. So and it's fantastic that you actually drive to wherever that person is in a way to meet up with them.
Yeah, and I mean, and the thing is too is like we take into a lot of factors. I mean, like I drove down to Manti if you've ever been there.
Mhm.
Worked out with a kid the other day. And, we take into account like, hey, height and weight, the projection, like a
Yeah,
guy that's gonna be tall and skinny is gonna be more projectable, and then we take in some stats and that kind of stuff where it's like, and it's always with the caveat of, okay, well, what level is he playing at? Who is he facing? Those kind of things. And I think
sure.
those things also with parents are kind of, I mean, I have this conversation a lot is like, how much do stats really matter? Okay. And because people get wrapped up into it. And I'm always like, hey, there's a few that really matter. Okay. In my opinion. And a lot of people I trust is like, your extra base hits. Okay. I mean, how many times are you hitting the ball out of the ballpark or doubles and triples? And then
Mhm.
the batting average, I'm like, people get wrapped up in that. And I'm like, the simple fact of the matter is like, we don't know who's keeping game changer, right? Like, we don't know the field that you're playing on. It's like
Right,
you hit 400 this last year. I'm like, your mom, we don't know if your mom was keeping the book.
right.
You know what I mean? And then
Yeah,
on the mound, it's like walks and strikeouts. Okay. Hits are going to be, I know hits is a little bit subjective, but it's like if you got 30 innings on the mound and have given up 15 hits and you got 45 strikeouts, it's like, that's pretty dang good.
mhm.
And so some of those that are a little bit more controllable, I guess, if you will, rather than like, I mean, I've dealt with enough high school programs. It's like they don't know how to differentiate some of them that like, okay, how do I score this as an earned run and an unearned run? And it's like, so your ERA's, a little bit less important than people think.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, good.
So
No, that's awesome. So one thing we talked about, but you mentioned multi-sport
yeah.
type athletes. Are you guys looking for those type of guys? Do college coaches care?
Um, I think it's pretty nuanced, but I think like the the multi-sport stuff is good, right? But I think it needs to be with a little bit of a caveat in that, I played football growing up, kind of halfway through high school, and I think um, football can be challenging just because once summer hits, like they've got conditioning, they've got workouts, they've got that kind of stuff, and I think playing football is good for you physically. You get bigger, stronger. You learn how to compete. But I think a lot of kids go, hey, I'm only going to play spring baseball. And, in reality, like you need to attend some summer events
Right.
for the recruiting portion of it. So
Mhm.
if you're missing, um, some big premier baseball events in the summer to go to a 7-on-7 or football, whatever, it's like, you know, it's hard to really, it's really hard to get that kid recruited the way they think they should or the way that you want to because they're not going to be at those events. And then come fall, they're playing football, right? And
Yeah.
so I think everybody really likes multi-sport athletes, but it's difficult just because it's like you've got to go to the right events at the right time. And if you're not willing to do that, or you have a football coach that doesn't allow you to do that, it's hard because
Yeah.
I mean, we deal with it, and you can see it on Twitter is like, "Hey, I'm off to a great start this spring," those kind of things, and it's like, "Okay, that's great, and the spring's important, but you gotta keep in mind that winter college is playing, right? They're playing in the spring. And so it's very difficult for college coaches to come out and see you in the spring as much as you think. So, and it depends on the staff makeup. Some staffs may say, I don't want you missing BP to go watch a game. Some staff say
Right.
that's fine. And so the summer and fall aspect is hard or is hard for multi-sport athletes if they don't balance it the right way. So I think
Mhm.
multi-sport athletes, all of them, like all college coaches is like, it's appealing to them. Hey, we want a guy that's taking a little bit of a breather, that's also got some athleticism and strength. So guys that specialize in baseball have a tendency sometimes to, and I'm overgeneralizing, but have a tendency to not be physically strong in some cases, like, they just don't put in the same amount of time in the weight room. They're playing baseball, they're doing other things, and so,
Mhm.
like, that's appealing to have, more of a strong, ready-made, college player rather than a kid that's short weight-wise, he's just not physical enough yet.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's and sometimes you think about the summer and fall. I'm just thinking about here in the spring. I'll go to an occasional high school game and I'll see, um, Garatano at CSN out there occasionally, um, Stolte or Kevin Higgins at UNLV.
Yep.
Because they had either they got off early that day and they can go see one of their pitchers that they're recruiting, but it's pretty rare because their schedules are just very crazy and they're limited in what they can do. So yeah, summer and spring is kind of a big deal,
Yeah.
in those regards. So I guess just keeping that in mind. So
Yep.
what the last I think part we'll cover here in regards to the recruiting stuff is when a family actually needs to be advised, right, on what to do. They need some help. What kind of family is like your ideal family that comes to you?
Ah, that's a great question. I think, like, uh, this is gonna sound bad, but maybe the family that doesn't have all the answers.
Hmm.
Okay. So, like, they've been, told a narrative of like, hey, you don't need that. You're good enough. I can help you. Your coach is going to help you, those kind of things. And so, to me, like, the family that's open to going like, hey, we don't quite know what we're doing. Okay, we've heard such and such about, like, this is what you should do, but we want to talk to somebody that has experience doing it. And so they're open-minded and going like, okay, like, we've heard this, is that accurate? Okay, we've heard this, is this true?
Hmm.
Instead, I can have a phone call, and within 5 minutes I'll know right away where it's like, okay, like, they don't want this just because they think they have it figured out,
Right.
which that's fine. I mean, it may work for them, but in the long run, like, if you take that player in a year later, I'm like, they're kind of doing the same stuff where it's like, if we would have worked with them, we could have given them some concrete answers of like, you know what, like, if you go to this camp, it's going to be a waste of money because they don't see you fitting there. Okay. And so I really like the open-minded, humble families that are willing to go, hey, we don't quite know, like, we don't quite know the right way to take on this recruiting process, and they're willing to listen, and they're willing to take feedback in terms of like, everybody else is doing this, but it doesn't feel right. Like, should we be doing this? you know,
Right.
rather than the person that's going, no, we're good. Like you should go to this event. You should play for this team. You'll be committed. It'll be fine. And I'm like,
Okay.
okay, go for it. And sometimes it works, but the vast majority of those times, or the vast majority of those families end up being disappointed some way, meaning like they're disappointed that they're not committed and another kid on their team is, or that they're not getting enough attention, or that they've only heard from a level that's beneath them, if you will. Like, hey, well, we don't want to play for, Division 2. And it's like, well, you're a Division 2 player, and this
Right.
program is a really good program, but you don't want to play there. And so those humble families that are willing to like engage and learn and like don't have all the answers they're a lot of fun to work with.
Good. Okay. And what's like the best age for a family that hires you? Are we talking freshman, sophomore, or even junior?
I think like, freshman, sophomore is great, and then, junior is good, but that's when they start to get a little bit antsy about like,
Sure.
hey, we got to get moving. I've got to be committed. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And I think by the time they're a junior, they've kind of run the gamut of like, hey, well, we've done all these things and nothing's worked. Okay. And
Right.
so like, I love working with younger families because you can kind of steer them in the direction of going like, that's not worth your time and energy and your money to go play in this event or go to this showcase or go to this event. So I think like the earlier we can get them, it's a lot more fun process too, because you can kind of see them grow and be like, okay, right now, you might not be a Division 1 guy, but in like 18 months from now, 12 months from now, you might be a really, really high level player. And we can steer you in that direction of like, okay, you've got a few offers that, you have a pick of a lot of good programs and a lot of good schools. And so the
Mhm.
young ones are really, really fun to work with. I'd say freshman, sophomore are good. And then, come junior year, the juniors are fun too, but it starts to be a little bit like anxious and worried and okay, we got to do this, and there's some fear there, if you will.
Yeah, it's like, is the rule still that coaches can contact them? Is it junior year, September?
Yeah, it's I
I
think
know it
yeah, September
changed.
1, September 1, yep, and then
September 1, yeah.
and
So
then
if
they
they
have
haven't received those calls as a junior and it's say November, December, they're like, "Oh boy, like we're behind." Is that fair
a
to
little
say?
bit, yeah, a little bit, and then I think I mean, the before that is obviously the third party, so a college coach will contact me and I set up a phone call and they
Yeah.
have a conversation. But yeah, they start to panic a little bit and then they start to go like, well, can we even go to a Division 1? And it's like, yeah, I mean, hope's not completely lost, but you're going to have to perform really well in the next little bit to have that opportunity.
Mhm.
And at that stage, they kind of go, well, you know, um, again, that's really where the comparison comes in. Like, well, then why is this kid going to this school and we did this? And it's like, well, you're a different player, or there's a different need, or those kind of things. And so, yeah, I mean, that fall of their junior year is really when like, they kind of have to have a good idea of where they're going or the direction of like, you know what, dude, you probably are still a little bit a ways away, and you should probably think a little bit more of the junior college route. So,
Right.
uh,
Whi
yeah,
which is fascinating to me because I think a lot of people would agree, like, and I can just relate it to our closest ones where we have CSN, Salt Lake in Arizona, Central Arizona, Yavapai, some of the bigger JCs. And you look at some of their rosters and what they can do, usually CSN has a couple arms every year that are draft type guys that are 94 to 97, some of them, and
yep,
couple position players that are pretty good. These guys, for whatever reason, ended up at a junior college, but that level of competition, because there's plenty of guys that I've seen that have been pretty good in high school. They even get to those junior colleges and they don't even sniff the field,
yeah, they're
right?
overmatched.
So that's why I always encourage players like go watch these teams play. Like, especially if you're a junior, senior, like, go look at what they do, look at the product that they put on the field. Say you're a second baseman, like, go and it's a little bit of comparison, right? But you're like, "Well, what does that guy do? Like, is what's he good at? Oh, he's really fast. He's got a good arm. He actually has some power, right?
Yeah.
Where do your skills and where do your tools line up? Because there's, in Arizona, for example, you have a D1 and a D2 division of junior college,
Yep, you
right?
do. Yep.
And I know um, a player that kind of fell through the cracks. Now we're talking about a guy playing the bit is Rojas. I think Josh
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Rojas,
Yep.
Diamondbacks. He was at Paradise Valley. It
Okay.
was one of my first years scouting, and I remember watching him. I'm like, oh, I really like this guy's swing. But I would kind of look around. I'm like, is anybody really on this guy? Like nobody's really taking video. And I'm like, this guy's good. And so it was like, as a young scout, I was kind of like, well, I guess do I just be bold and go do my own thing, right? And so you kind of
Yeah.
have to figure that stuff out. It's a whole different story, but point being, even kids that are at these JCs that are surrounded by us, these are good players, right?
Yeah.
And knowing that if you can't even compete there, right? So it's kind of probably part of your job is to like you're not really quite at this level, right?
Yeah.
Which could be quite the blow to a family. And so do you feel like you have to let some kids down and tread lightly there?
Yeah, I mean, you do, but you try to front load it as much as you can, like I said in
Okay.
the evaluation where it's like, "Hey, if you're not at this level, like, I'm not gonna ruin my, relationship with such and such school and our company's relationship just to, basically
Yeah.
say, I know that you're not good enough to play there."
Right.
And so that's a challenging dynamic, and I think, like, um, you try to find out as early as you can if they're thinking a little bit more like, um, you know, realistic about, like, their players' abilities, and those are the ones that you're kind of really and for me, like, I try to get as many voices as I can, like, whether it's the high school coach or someone that I know is like, "Hey, do and know and trust, do you think this kid is a college player? If so, like, what level do you see him?" And so I
Mhm.
try to get that much info there as I can, and then, um, I think most people though that I've encountered, they kinda just wanna know too, though. So it's like, okay,
Okay.
like, that man, that's good to know that, like, we probably fit better at a junior
Yeah.
college.
Just tell me where do I belong almost,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because they don't know,
Yeah.
and so most of my, encounters have been very positive, where it's
Mhm.
like, "Hey, if you wanna pitch at this level, the velocity's gotta be at this, particular area," and they just for whatever reason, yeah, they don't watch, they don't know, they've been told, and
Yeah.
so I think if you can, kinda break that down with them to where it's like, "Okay, these are really, like, where you're gonna fit, and these are the reasons why." And then we've taken it a few steps where it's like, I'm happy to relay like what such and such university has given me feedback about you to say, hey, like they don't see you at that level either. And
Right.
so those you try to reinforce it that way, but most of my encounters have been positive because they by and large, most people want to know, like,
Yeah.
okay, this is where we fit.
Yeah. And it's just we wanna save time, right? If
Exactly.
you're a freshman or sophomore, they're obviously not typically fully developed yet. So there's
Nope.
time and there's growth. But now you get into that junior or senior, some are late bloomers, right? Of course. But you kind of have an idea of where they're starting to fit in. So that's good. That's good. Is there anything else you want to cover before we move on to the bees?
I think we're good, man. I
It's
think,
pretty good, yeah. Okay,
yeah.
cool. So now you're at Salt Lake Stadium or you're at home, but you're working for the Bees. You've had a long history. Um, I think your dad is a big part of the Bees, if I'm not mistaken, if he's still running around there. But tell us what you're doing with the Bees in the youth program.
Yeah. So my dad has been, yeah, he's been around a long time. He's the president and general manager. I was lucky to grow up around the ballpark and
Yeah.
kind of silly enough to want to coach from that experience. But my full-time job, I'm the director of youth programs and events. And so my full-time job is really it's a combination of a few things, whether it's community relations with, our local municipalities, little leagues, comp programs, and then doing things like our kids clubs, and things of that nature that are geared towards, growing our fan base, but growing the involvement of, youth players, in the state of Utah that will be connected, or we want to try to connect to the game of baseball and have them have a positive experience. It could be coming to the ballpark with their dad for the first time and playing catch in the outfield and, going, "Hey, I love baseball," because it's like I was able to go play catch with my dad in the outfield and have a hot dog, that kind of
Right.
thing. Like, okay, how can we help our Cal Ripken leagues here improve, their baseball aspect, or the comp, teams improve their baseball aspect. And so that's a lot of my full-time day-to-day stuff is trying to improve, um, kids' experience with baseball, if you will, in our state in many different ways.
That's cool. Yeah, so I know it's got to be a little bit tough just weather-wise out there because it's, baseball is kind of a spring, essentially summer sport, a little bit limited because of the weather. But what are you seeing in regards to are less kids playing baseball than what you're normally seeing?
I think you could make that case, yeah, and I think, like, there's a lot of reasons for that. I think it could be anything from the love of the game, like, the love's kind of been driven out of them, like, they're playing too much, it's too serious, it's not fun anymore, to, the cost access, that's a major barrier for some families, is that they financially can't play, or they're gravitating to a more, accessible, financially accessible sport to them, that doesn't require the same amount of burdens. And then,
Mhm.
quite frankly, like, love it or hate it with some of the rule changes in baseball, but, they could be frankly wanting to be attached to a faster paced sport, or something they perceive to be a faster paced sport, like football or basketball or whatever, lines up with their interests more than, watching 9 innings of baseball. And so, I think so, but I think, for the most part, the ones that are participating in baseball are it's a pretty strong crew, and I think, you're hoping that the participants love it more so than it's something that's driven by their parents, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, and I just being baseball guys, right? It's I totally understand too with when you add football and basketball and start talking about recruiting and scholarships, it's that they get that full ride, right? If you're at the D1. So yeah, it makes logical sense. Um, but yeah, I know you're doing your best, right? Trying to do our best to keep the game going, keep it alive, and I think it's it seems to be doing great out here in Las Vegas.
Mhm.
I see there's people just everywhere. Kids are everywhere playing the game and different facilities all over the place and stuff like that. So, well, good man. Best of luck to you with all the endeavors of the youth sports, right? And working with kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's a blast, it's a lot of fun, you see a lot of different dynamics, though, and I think, like, the cool part about working with the bees is, you have, some access to what Major League Baseball is doing with, trying to grow the game for young ages, and, get them more involved to where they truly are loving the game and are lifelong fans. They
Yeah.
don't have to be a big leaguer or play in college. It's like, it could be the next Bill James, if you will. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
you're attaching to a generation of fans that you're hoping will love playing the game of baseball, or excuse me, love the game of baseball, and will be lifelong fans. So it's fun to see that when it kind of clicks for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very good, man. This has been awesome. So, if somebody is interested, a parent, an athlete that might be listening to this, and they want some help on the recruiting side, how can they reach out to you?
So they can reach out at, collegeathleteadvantage.com, okay, or they can, I should have probably linked my email to you. or they can find me on social media. And so those are probably the two ways to do it. Is if on collegeathleteadvantage.com, there's a way to contact us.
Okay.
Uh, so we'll get all the kind of inbound, incoming referrals, and then social media wise, they can follow me. They can send me a direct message, and I'll be happy to talk with them and kind of see what their interests are. So
Okay.
um, those are probably the two primary ways.
And if someone's not in like your area of Utah or surrounding states, and it's say someone in Texas, is it a territorial thing? Like the person in Texas works with that person?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
typically we like to, but I mean, we've
Yeah.
taken on a few kids that, may not necessarily be in our area, but have reached out to us. And then we have enough of advisors across the country where it's like, that advisor can go see them because they're close to them, or they can
Mhm.
to them and, be assigned to them if that makes sense. So
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. Well, collegeathleteadvantage.com, right? Where they can reach out to you, Derek. Well, man, this has been great. I really appreciate your info on the recruiting side. I know it changes quite a bit, and there's probably a lot more to even consider covering, but for the sake of time, but appreciate coming on. Wish you the best with your recruiting process and helping kids, and also helping the local youth out there with the bees team and getting those kids out to the park.
thanks, Chad. I appreciate you, and thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on, guys, and we'll see you in the next show.